Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming back. Hope you're excited for the second day of the conference and hope everyone had a nice evening
Buenos
yesterday.
días, espero.
So we're going to have two panels this morning. Just a reminder that the cameras
hayáis tenido una buena velada. Vamos a ir empezando. Las cámaras van a moverse con los movimientos, no tanto con el sonido. Por lo tanto, si pueden no moverse demasiado para que funcione todo bien. Y ahora vamos a pasar al orden del día. Sí, la interpretación. Si necesitan interpretación simultánea, tenemos auriculares aquí en la sala y si no, si estáis en Zoom, hay que darle a los tres puntitos y normalmente después aparece un menú para elegir la interpretación. Varios paneles, dos paneles hoy, el panel 4 que está a punto de empezar, empleadores versus empleados para la reducción del tiempo de trabajo y también, bueno, tendremos también luego una sesión sobre la campaña en relación con las campañas en relación con la reducción del tiempo de trabajo y
not sure we promoted this as much earlier, but you can join us as a
tendría que
member
haber
if
dicho
you're
esto
interested.
antes, pero pueden también unirse a nuestra red. Hay un código QR que aparece en pantalla y que está allí también en la sala.
And we also have our next webinar, which is taking place on the 13th of November.
Tenemos un próximo seminario en línea también el 13 de noviembre y Mark Furman de UniEuropa hablará de la reducción del tiempo de trabajo en el sector de la limpieza. Pero bueno, podrán inscribirse después. También hay bebidas aquí atrás si lo desean y ahora le voy a dar la palabra a Aliyah para empezar nuestro panel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is
Hola,
Aliyah Davies.
soy Aliyah Davies, coordinadora de campaña en la campaña 4-Day Week Campaign, la semana de 4 días. Hacemos campaña para una semana de 4 días sin pérdida de remuneración y bueno, hemos organizado un proyecto piloto el año pasado. Ayer se habló bastante de este proyecto, pero si quieren ver los resultados están en nuestra web y también hay un informe de seguimiento después del proyecto que, bueno, era la primera evaluación de impacto, así que pueden mirar estos dos informes. Habitualmente siempre hemos trabajado con los empleadores de cara a la introducción de la semana de 4 días y con un sistema de acreditación y también reconocemos que una transición hacia una semana más corta no se puede hacer solo con los empleadores, sino que también se tiene que hacer con los sindicatos y trabajadores y trabajadoras, porque evidentemente también tiene que redundar en beneficio de los trabajadores. Será un placer moderar este debate. Y bueno, con los diferentes panelistas podremos ahondar más en estos aspectos. Está con nosotros Joan Sanchis de la Universidad de Valencia. También está Jarc, secretaria confederal de la CES, y Katrin Mohr, secretaria política en el Departamento de Política General y Cuestiones Sociopolíticas del Consejo Ejecutivo de IG Metall de Alemania. Y voy a darle la palabra, sin más dilaciones, a Joan. Buenos días, es un placer estar aquí un año más. Voy a centrarme más en temas teóricos porque, bueno, después tendremos un debate más relacionado con la experiencia y la realidad del trabajo. Yo soy sobre todo académico, pero también me he ocupado de políticas en España y en proyectos pilotos que llevamos a cabo en la región de Valencia y también a nivel del Estado español. Voy a, hablar de mi experiencia, sobre lo que ocurre entre empleadores y empleados en el marco de la revolución.
There's a growing interest in work time reduction debates, especially in Europe, after decades of this issue being overshadowed by other more urgent questions, like, for instance, getting wage increases. We talked about it yesterday, or overcoming the crisis of the 2008 crisis. So work time reduction has been on the agenda, but it was a secondary issue in the best case scenario. So beyond all the big structural changes that obviously have occurred in recent decades in the labor market, like technology, like incorporation of women to the labor market, this renewed debate on work time reduction, at least for me, has some interesting new parameters that I think it's very interesting to point out and to reflect on them. On the one hand, work time reduction has become an issue of great interest to many companies in specific sectors. This is not new. Debates at the beginning of the 20th century also started with companies, but there is a high degree of interest in many companies in specific sectors with issues regarding productivity, improving efficiency, improving talent retention, redundancies, all that. So especially in this recent wave of 4-day-week trials and work time reduction proposals in general, companies have played, let's say, an important role in the growing up of this debate. On the other hand, the work time reduction, it's every day more understood as a measure capable of igniting broad social changes. So we are talking each day more of questions regarding gender equality or even fighting climate change. So this is due obviously to many things. For instance, the tensions regarding care work, mental health issues, incorporation of women into the labor market that has created all of these problems also, or has at least made them more visible. But also, I think this is also due to a set of profound changes in the values and priorities that we have towards work, especially among younger generations. So in this context, the traditional driving forces or arguments for work time reduction that maybe used to be like fighting technological unemployment maybe in the 80s or redistributing work, all of these arguments are being displaced by a new set of more profound arguments that are tied to this rethinking of the values and the meaning that we attribute to work. This is the way that I see it. So in this sense, taking into account these two factors or two dimensions, I think a new space for consensus has between companies and workers has been at least partially created. There is, at least in certain sectors, in certain kind of workers, there are opportunities like to reach agreements that lead to work time reduction. Many companies, as we have mentioned, at least for instance in knowledge-intensive sectors, have an interest in talking about work time reduction to reduce absenteeism, to increase productivity, to retain highly skilled professionals. And at the same time, workers may be more willing than ever to advance work time reduction. We have seen it, for instance, in the Portuguese trial, that workers attribute 20% of the value of their wage to the work time reduction that they have experienced. So work time reduction, it's getting more and more important for companies and also for workers. Of course, this should be apparently good news, but we have to be aware that also in the process of discussing and advancing this new wave, new initiatives of work time reductions, some issues are also emerging and are issues that are very tied to the deep political economy implications of work time reduction. So I would like to point out three of these problems or issues that we have to be vigilant or the issues that we can reflect on. First, these changes in work attitudes that I was mentioning before are colliding in many cases with let's say the paradigm of work as a source of identity and social progress that has dominated for many decades, at least since World War II in Europe, especially. In this sense, many actors, I have to say, including many unions, many social democratic political parties, which once were the main drivers of work time reduction and have this demand in their DNA, to say so, are having some difficulties adapting to this new situation, and sometimes are being, for instance, very skeptical of work time reduction or very slow to advance toward these initiatives. We have seen it in the 40-week trials in many countries. The second thing is that by product of this new situation, we have seen a new coalition of actors pushing for work time reduction. So we have seen a very transversal coalition of different kinds of actors with advocacy groups, think tanks, academics, companies, organizations led by companies like 40-week Global or these kind of organizations that are actually led by companies. So we have this broad coalition. With this new broad coalition, that it's a coalition that it has less cohesion than, let's say, the classical pro-reduction coalition, and has also many contradictions. We have talked about some of these contradictions yesterday, like 4 days versus 32 hours, like different perspectives on what are the benefits or the reasons for work time reduction. So cohesion is not so high as maybe some decades ago with the movement that started, like work time reduction from unions, social democratic parties. So this is an important change, I think, like taking account of this new group of people emerging and working towards work time reduction from different perspectives. And the third issue that I would like to point out is that in this new context where work time reduction has become politically more transversal, maybe more transversal than ever, some important risks are also appearing, as I mentioned at the beginning. For instance, in the response to the success, at least in the public debate, of the 40-work idea, the proposal to compress work hours is reemerging in some countries. So the 40-week is not so new. In the 80s in the United States, it was a very widely debated proposal, but it was a compressed work week. This idea disappeared afterwards, but now it's regaining momentum, and some, especially conservative politicians, are coming aboard the idea, but with the purpose of having a compressed work week. So this is a risk because it undermines, let's say, the 40-week concept tied to work time reduction. And we have seen this in many countries like Belgium, in the UK, Spain. Moreover, some of the companies that are taking part on these trials or are advancing these initiatives, we have to say that we are seeing some of these initiatives being pursued, for instance, with significant reductions in pay. We have also seen some companies use this kind of initiatives as a cosmetic or... Okay, great. I'm going to try to finish. So we have seen many companies using this as a cosmetic measure or a marketing measure. It's sort of greenwashing tied to work time reduction because it's fashionable and it's appealing. So we have seen all these issues appearing in recently. So to sum up, we are, I think, in a new scenario with great opportunities for advancing work time reduction, but at the same time, a profound rearrangement of values and attitudes towards work, I think it's taking place. So key actors like unions, progressive political parties, I think they have to realize this and they have to reassess their political priorities. Many are doing it already, and we have seen it in recent years. I also want to say the public policy can play a role in this sense to try to tackle all of these problems that we have mentioned before. There are, for instance, some countries that are planning new legal frameworks to reduce the maximum working week. Like, for instance, we in Spain are discussing right now to go to 37.5 hours per week in 2 years. So this is a new standard working week of 37.5 hours. There have been also proposals to implement subsidy programs that help the small and medium firms get aboard this new work time reduction wave. So yeah, to conclude, I think we have to make sure that this work time reduction debate happens with the parameters that we desire, that are with no pay reduction, with good social and environmental impacts, with no work intensification, as we talked yesterday, and also in a democratic manner that benefits society as a whole. So yeah, I will leave it at that because I have some more things, but I don't have time. So thank you.
Thank you. I will hand over to Taya. Just for the benefit of the translators and those who are listening to translation, if you could try and talk a bit slower. But please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, and thank you for this reminder. So yeah, I was just sharing with the others that basically, yeah, when I was preparing my speech, I wanted to say everything about that has already been said yesterday and today. Everything, of course, about the benefits that we are recognizing when talking about the working time reduction. So the benefits for the workers, for their health, for their creativity, for gender equality as well. Also, of course, for productivity, addressing absenteeism, of course, the benefits also for the environment. And I think that, yeah, here sitting with all of you in this room, I think that we can all agree about this. And also the trade union practice showcased that, because indeed there has been more than 100 of collective agreements signed that are addressing working time reductions. And working time reduction, it's basically the second topic or like a working time arrangement that it's composed in the collective agreements. So for sure, it is a topic. It's happening in the practice as well. But yeah, then really thinking not to be too repetitive, I think that, yeah, we also maybe need to acknowledge a little bit better the political context that we are right now. And especially at the European level, where although we talk about all of those benefits, from what we see is that employers are still not convinced. And just 2 weeks ago, we had a joint seminars, ETUC and the employers organization at the European level, exactly on working time flexibility or working time negotiations. And we had researchers, we have experts, we have trade unions there. We had studies to showcase our arguments, and employers are still reluctant to really put this topic on the political agenda. So maybe this conference can really be a rethinking opportunity for all of us to question ourselves, what more can we do? Because maybe all of the pilot projects, all of the collective agreements already there, all of the research are very good basis, but we need to think about the step forwards as well. And looking at the political context that we experience at the European level, especially with the new European Commission and with the new reports coming out, I'm afraid to say that we are not necessarily on the best track. Because just looking at the composition of the new European Commission and the Draghi report, which is the biggest document that everybody are talking about right now, we can see that the priorities will go into different direction. And just on Wednesday, we had a tripartite social summit or a social dialogue exercise where it was us, the employers organization, and the Commission with Ursula von der Leyen, and the whole discussion was about competitiveness, about how we need to make Europe more competitive so that we can compete with China and with the United States, and how we have to basically ensure deregulation so that we are going to be in this race for competitiveness. And along this discussion, what was even said by the employer is that, I will quote them now, that in Europe, I guess we're just lazy. So this is the discussion that we're facing as ETUC with the employers. Not only they want to lower the working standards, not only they want to lower the environmental standards, not only that, of course, they want to lower the wages in order to be more competitive, they still consider workers in Europe as lazy. So imagine then introducing the topic of working time reduction into this discussion. Clearly, they might not be so open about it. Nevertheless, I think that, yeah, this should be exactly our motivation to put this topic and to look at it from the other direction. Because what we are saying as ETUC is that, yes, we can talk about competitiveness, but the competitiveness should not be reducing the working standards, should not be lowering the wages. And the main competitive advantage that we have in Europe, it's actually our European social model. It's a Europe where it's a good place to live and work, where it's a good place to have children, to raise children, where you have access to public services, where you have public transport, where you have the environment that is actually still pleasant to be in. And we are really trying to emphasize exactly this quality of working and living and build our competitive advantages on that. And of course, we will have to do a lot more exactly to convince the employers to go into this direction. And I think it's fair to say that the social dialogue at the European level has not been so great in the past. One of these examples was the negotiations on a directive on telework and right to disconnect, which again, I think can be very much related to the topic of working time reduction as well. Because what we see is that, of course, the boundaries are getting blurred more and more, the boundaries between the working time and, of course, the free time. And with the directive on telework and the right to disconnect, we're still not having an agreement how this will be resolved. And another aspect that we're talking about at the European level, it's, of course, labor market shortages. So again, employers are putting this again on an agenda, saying that workers do not have the right skills, again, that they are lazy, they are not taking off the jobs, they need hardworking workers. And maybe, again, we could use this discussion to bring a topic of working time reduction as an answer potentially for labor market shortages as well. Because the sectors where they are facing the biggest shortages are the sectors that has the poorest working conditions. So maybe attracting workers could be also through good working conditions, where working time reduction could be one of the elements. Of course, it has to be aligned with the others as well, of course with pay, of course with health and safety, but we believe that we can make jobs more attractive if they ensure those kind of benefits as well. So I think that in all of this discussion, we really need to look at the strategic opportunities and how to bring our narratives in. So that the topic of working time reduction, it's not only going to stay at the company level, where we see a huge progress indeed, as has been reported already, but that we also bring it to the political discussion. And when I'm talking about political discussion, I think it would be very naive to think that in the next mandate, in the next 5 years, we're going to see a directive on this. We will not. I'm afraid to say that. But nevertheless, this discussion needs to be part of the area where we are, exactly that the trade unions can present it or can work on it at the company level. Because if there is a narrative around us that workers are lazy and that this is something harmful, also at the company or sectoral level, it's going to be very hard for the trade unions to do their job and basically start introducing those ideas. So for us, what we are trying to focus on at the ETUC, it's to really empower the workers and trade unions to be ready for those discussions, to have arguments on their side, and basically to see the examples where already exists, to break those myths that working time reduction is going to decrease productivity, or that it's not applicable for every sector, or that it's just something for the rich countries or something like this. No, we really want to equip them with those arguments, while at the same time very much working on the political agenda. One of the aspects where working time reduction could really help also the trade unions, it's the new narratives that we're trying to establish. Trade unions and the trade union density, unfortunately, it's in decline. We are losing members. Trade unions are losing power. We are losing collective bargaining power. And unfortunately, social dialogue, it's not necessarily at a good level in most of the countries. Of course, we know the examples of Nordic countries where social dialogue, it's at a very good level, where membership is even increasing. But in most of the European countries, what we see, it's even measures of trade union busting, where trade unions are being attacked at the company level and also many times from the governments. So even if they want to push for the trade union agenda, they're facing huge difficulties in that. And in order to regain the political power, the bargaining power, one of the main priority for ETUC, it's also trade union renewal, where we are focusing very much on membership growth, which is the precondition, on collective bargaining growth, and in re-establishing our trade union vitality within our own structures, making it more democratic, making it more participatory, not only having passive members, but really active members. And again, the working time reduction could be one of these topics, where trade unions can really showcase that we are valuable partner in order to improve not only working but living for all of the workers. So I think that, yeah, this can be a momentum for our renewal as well. And yes, maybe just to conclude, as one of the follow-up steps, I really think we need to focus very much on building the alliances. So to really connect the environmental organizations, trade unions, of course, feminist organizations, youth organizations, all of those progressive forces, which also include political parties and which can also include progressive employers, so that maybe they can push from the company, from the sectoral, from the national level, also to the European level, and say to the European employers organizations that this is a topic that we want to discuss. And with this, hopefully, yes, the reduced working time, it's going to become a standard also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Katrin, who's got a bit more of a practical example.
Yes,
Share with us.
thanks for inviting me to the panel. I very much agree with Tia that unions are very important and a key actor in this, and maybe missing in this headline of the panel. Of course, they're always working with the employees on that, but at least for Germany, you can say that the unions have historically and at the present time played a very important role in bringing forward working time reduction. And I want to talk a bit about what IG Metall has reached in terms of working time reduction, but shortly sketch also the current debate and the employer's role in this discussion, and do some conclusions on future debates and the struggles. So my 8 minutes allow for that. And well, IG Metall has actually really been a pioneer of working time reduction. IG Metall, I don't know if you know, it's the biggest union in Germany. It has 2.1 million members, and its most important sectors are the metal and electrical industry, encompassing automotive and machine manufacturing, which is quite big in Germany, but also iron and steel making and a couple of other sectors. And IG Metall has just celebrated the 40th anniversary of the successful fight for the 35-hour week, which just 2 days ago had a big anniversary event celebrating this, because in 1984, IG Metall made a strike for almost 7 weeks, and by that reaching an agreement that provided for the stepwise reduction of working time from 40 to 35 hours. And since 1995, this has been in place in our most important sectors. So the standard working time for full-time work in these sectors is 35 hours for almost 30 years now. And that's been a big step, because this is almost covering like 1.8 million people in Germany. And so we really were like an avant-garde in setting the standard of short full-time, we sometimes call it in Germany. In the East, it took us, unfortunately, a long time to start a process of aligning the working time in the East, which has been higher for a long time. But now we are making good progress, because we reached a framework agreement a couple of years ago. And now a lot of the companies are turning stepwise to the 35-hour week as well in the East. Well, the issue of working time reduction also came back to the union's agenda a couple of years ago in terms of individual options to reduce working time. Of course, we have the legal framework being able to reduce to part-time, but you have a loss of wage, of course. And we reached an agreement in 2018 providing for a choice between an element of money and free time, additional free time. And if you choose the time option, it's 2 days more worth than the money option. And that's very, very popular among our membership, about 250,000 people choosing the time option each year. And that is to say, they're only eligible if they are considered a group with extended time needs. That is, people with young children under the age of 8, people who have to take care of sick or ill or elderly relatives, or if they worked in shift work for a long time, they have this option for time. And we are actually discussing about extending this to everybody or to other groups as well. And that's also on the negotiation table, on the negotiations taking place right now in the metal and electrical industry. But actually a pay is the big issue of this negotiation round due to past inflation. But we are hoping to make some progress in extending this individual option as well. A third trend that set working time back on the agenda is the crises or the transformation processes we are facing in our industries due to decarbonization, or the need to ecologically transform our industries. And that will mean in the automotive sector, we'll need less workers to fabricate better electric cars, for instance, or in the steel industry, we will need less people to produce green steel. And for that, we have provided in the past agreements elements that enable us to use additional payments to compensate for working time reduction in case of crises, or in case jobs have to be reduced within the firm due to transformation. And these elements can then be used to partially compensate for the loss of wages in this situation. So that really the transformation process, the decarbonization, has also brought the issue of working time back on the agenda of collective bargaining in that way. For the discussion about the 4-day work week, we had this yesterday. Campus was arguing for that not being the model, and we'd always negotiate about hours and not days. That I totally agreed to, because people have different needs. So somebody needs to go to kindergarten early, so it might be better to have a 5-day work week, or other people need a long weekend for recreation. So for us, it's important that a 4-day work week is like a chiffre for different models of working time, and not like a standard model of one size fits all, and that it's really connected to working time reduction, and not as in the Belgium model, just spreading, pushing more hours into longer days, because that's not healthy and not good for a longer working life. Now, the employers, Joan, you said they are an important player. In Germany, some are, very little. It's a tiny fraction of employers taking part in these pilots. They are presenting actually the research on the pilot today on a conference in Germany, but this is so little of the employees. The employees, the vast majority, is very much against working time reduction in Germany, and we are really actually lobbying for extending working times, for slashing the 8-hour day we have in place, for slashing the minimum rest period we have, and so on. So actually, I'm not really seeing the employers as an progressive actor that much in the debate. And there also, some of these employers are doing this to have an advantage in the labor market towards other or against other employers. But that means it's not like a collective solution. It's always for this employees employed by this progressive employer who has a self-interest in it. But in order to have collective solutions, or to have more workers profit from working time reduction, you need collective agreements on that. And that can only be done by unions. At least that's the case in Germany. We wouldn't have the option to legally cut the standard working time per week. That has to be done by collective bargaining for the different sectors. And so the unions are really the actors who have to fight this through together with the employees and against the resistance of most employers and their associations. And as history has shown, working time reduction has always been the result of union struggles. At least that's true for Germany. And so we have to fight these struggles and go for it.
Thank you. That's three very different but also similar perspectives, I guess, on this debate. And Before we come to questions, I just want to give panelists a very brief moment. By brief, I mean 1 minute tops, if you would like to just respond to anything that you've heard. So I'll start with John, and I really do mean just 1 minute. Just anything that you wanted to come back on.
Yeah, just to comment briefly on what Katrin said, it's obvious that there are different contexts. For instance, in Spain, collective bargaining is important, but also public policy plays a more active role. And I think this is needed because, of course, when you are in a negotiating table, it's difficult for workers to be as powerful as employers. I mean, you have to organize, you have to obviously act through unions and empower unions, strengthen them. But at the same time, we are seeing that, well, you have said it already, right? Union membership is declining for a variety of reasons. They are being attacked also by many governments and many political parties, all that. So yeah, of course, you have to find a way to reach people and to engage people. And I see that there is what I mentioned, a change in work attitudes and the relevance of work for our lives that needs to be addressed also by unions, because there is a lot of people that is in this movement of work time reduction that sometimes don't feel represented by unions. And this is very strange because work time reduction is in the DNA of unions. So I think this is one of the pending subjects to say, and we have to reach, I think, a balance between collective bargaining. It's important, but public policy has to play a role because we have the backing of the public opinion in general for advancing work time reduction. So we have to put this into value, I think.
Yeah, for me, basically the call to fight for it. Of course, it's the main call. And I really wish that, yeah, this would be, of course, along with wages, one of the main topic for the trade unions for the future. And I really think it needs to be a movement coming from the ground as well. I very much agree. It needs to be aligned with policies. It needs to be part of the public discussion, because if it's not, trade unions have to break so many walls to even bring it there. So it has to be really a parallel process that is going to allow us to fight for it and to really build its movement. I think it has to be a shift in the workers' perception as well. I'm sorry to say, but I don't think many of the workers would really put this as their number one priority or number one demand, or would even dream to think about those kind of alternatives. Because because of so many crises that we have been through, they really managed to convince us that we just need to be happy to have a job, or that we just need to be humble and shut up and just accept whatever employers are telling us. And right now they're telling us we need to be more competitive, and it's not necessarily the truth. So I really think the empowerment has to really be focused on the workers, and with their being empowered, I think that we can build the movement.
Of course, public policy and public discourse are important, and it really brings air under the wings of unions to bring this forward. And so I don't want to neglect this or say it's not important, but at least for Germany, it's true that it really, the level that's been regulated is the collective bargaining level and not the legal framework. And so in order to have strong movements for collective bargaining agreements on working time, you need a favorable public opinion, of course. And there also the value change you've mentioned is playing into that movement forward, and that's very important. And also the pilot projects are fine. I don't want to bash them at all. I mean, those employers, they're doing a job on their side to bring forward a movement for de-standardizing full-time work in a way, like making it more normal to have a full short-time week. And in that, it's all like pieces of a puzzle that come together in a movement for going away from the 40-hour week and having it more normal to work shorter full time and have different flexible models of working time.
Thank you very much. We're going to open up to some questions from the audience. Can I just ask that you're quite succinct with your questions as well? No long speeches from the floor if we can avoid it. And did we want to go, there's a hand up in the middle, and then we'll go towards the back as well.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to try to be as short as possible. I'm from a Belgian trade union, ACV-CSC, and I negotiate in the banking and insurance industry with employers. My first question is, I totally agree. We have to struggle, and history has proven in the past century and decades that there's only going to be an improvement if we have collective labor agreements. I agree. But at the same time, I'm confused and puzzled because yesterday there was a confirmation that you also need trust. You also need cooperation with employers to really in practice have a working time reduction, because it's very complicated. So how do you do it? And I look at my country. I mean, I can only dream of the system of the Nordics, where they have, like, I hope, a little bit more of cooperation. And I don't know about Germany. You have the Mitbestimmung. I don't know if that's something that has had to deal with it. But in Belgium, it's this country is a very specific country with a specific social dialogue model. So I'm confused and puzzled. How are we going to have a struggle and at the same time cooperation? So that's my first question. Do I have the right to another question? My second question is, what about productivity? Because yesterday, productivity will rise if you do a 4-day week, and productivity, it's always a good argument, but apparently the employers don't buy it. So why not? And my last question
I think that's pushing it. There's a question at the back.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. It's actually not a question, but I'll be very brief. So my name is Sarah King. I work in the workers group at the European Economic and Social Committee. And it's actually just linked to, the aspect of, the sort of political discussion and getting people on board. So we've actually been asked by the Polish presidency of the European Union, which will be the next presidency starting in January, to prepare what we call an exploratory opinion on this issue, working time reduction. And so really just to say that, I mean, it's true that at the moment, all we're hearing, from the Commission and others is the discussion about how to make Europe more competitive. But as Teo was saying, yeah, we do need to build alliances, and they are possible. So I think the fact that actually, an incoming presidency has asked to put this issue on the table, and they frame it in the context of, how can this work for employees, but also while maintaining European competitiveness, I think this can also be a hook for us. So it's really just some information. Information will be available on the ESU's website. And another thing I would say is, if our members, especially those who are in the study groups, feel and see that there is interest in this issue, then that can also be helpful. So feel free to reach out. Thanks.
I think we had a lady in the front here, and then come to online. And if there is time, we'll get a second round of questions.
Yes, thank you for all your 3 wonderful contributions. And the seeming contradiction between the one side employers as the drivers, and on the other side employees with their trade unions. This is a contradiction, but at the same time we have the really paradox situation in Germany, at least, that many, not so few, in the meanwhile, that are many almost middle and small companies who really make the 4-day weeks also with a real working time reduction and compensation of wage, but they make it by themselves and against the proposals of their confederations. They are completely against, and they make really only propaganda in Germany, on the EU level, everywhere. And this is a real problem. But the real movement of the enterprises themselves in direction working time reduction is driven by the need to get qualified staff. They have no other possibilities than to offer these attractive working time conditions. And from that, this is a new situation. We had not in the past. I'm coming from the printers trade union, and we fought together with IG Metall, and we striked 13 weeks to get the 35 hours. And insofar, Thea has completely right. It is only possible by struggle. But the new situation is, I think, that the needs for the enterprises to get qualified staff can be transformed in arguments for the trade unions to fight for the working time reduction. This is health. This is safety. This is the reconciliation of work and family or private life, and also something like motivation. Because this, we made a little study on enterprises with this 4-day week, and they reported that the workers after this measure really more motivated work. And this is one reason why the productivity is growing. And so I think when you, as trade unions, would be able to transform this in your own arguments, then could be successful.
Can we just get one question from online, please? Thank you.
Is there a risk that the current discussion on working time reduction may lead to a counterproductive scrutiny of work and working time similar to the one brought forward by the scientific management proposed by Taylor and others more than a century ago? The effects of such approach focus on economic efficiencies and productivity are well known.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with Tia. If you could be, there are about 5 questions there. Pick 1 or 2 that you want to answer. And if you could be succinct, we may be able to get another round in.
Yeah, maybe just like, opportunities for sure are there. I very much agree. Now we are facing labor market shortages. Labor market shortages could be an opportunity for the trade unions to really fight for improving the working conditions. Because if employers are struggling to attract talents, then yes, they will need to change something in their own sphere as well. So for sure, let's just hope that in all of the sectors. Let's see, like one of the sector that it's really facing labor market shortages, it's, for example, teachers or it's care workers. And if we look at the care sector, we see that it's getting more and more platformized. So it means that it's platforms taking over, it's a gig economy that is taking over of those sectors. And we know in gig economy, there's not even a working time, you're there on demand. So the boundary, it's even more blurred. So I think that, it's important to take different factors in mind when developing the new strategies. And on my opinion, it is a struggle. So it would be nice if it would be a cooperation. And yes, everybody, I guess, are dreaming about the Nordic model. But I am still convinced that between the workers and the labor and the capital, there is a fight. There is not a cooperative relationship, but there is a fight between those two.
Nicely follow up on this, because my answer to you would be, of course, the social dialogue needs to work, and there has to be some trust, but in the end it's a matter of power relations. What you can put forward in terms of power resources, and then you can reach good negotiations. And for this individual options model I mentioned before, we had like people on strike, over 500,000 people striking just one day, but or hour-wise, but we really made clear that our workers want this model and they need more time, and we could prove that by taking them to the streets, or them taking to the streets. And so in the end, of course, you always have to conclude a compromise with the employers, but you can only reach a good compromise if you have the power to fight this through. And to the productivity issue, maybe in the manufacturing sector, it's not about so much squeezing out the last bit of productivity out of the work organization or process, but it's about reducing sickness, absenteeism, and stuff like that, what Tia and others were talking about before. And that's even more true in the care sector and hospitals and kindergartens and teachers, what you were talking about. And I guess there is a big potential for gaining people back for these jobs, as you talked about it, or yesterday was been talked about, and also making the work there more attractive, so people want to enter these sectors and be working there. So I guess there's the big gain. And for Germany, still is true that a lot of women are working small part-time. And if you change the model of what is standard full-time work, it would also make, of course, accompanied by the building up of childcare even more, but that would also enable women to extending their hours and taking more part in the labor market, and that way extending the labor force.
Joan, I just want to come to you on the rest of the questions, and I wonder if you could specifically, it wasn't quite a question, but more of a statement on the role of the EU Parliament, and if there is a legislative role to play. I wonder if you could touch on that as well.
Okay, well, first, just a brief comments on productivity and also on the trials that were mentioned before. For me, I have to say that the argument about productivity, we have to understand it as a strategic argument. I mean, for me, it's a kind of a Trojan horse, if you like, because it's a discourse that can reach actors that otherwise will be out of the debate. So for me, politically is useful, like to use it and to advance it. And this is what, for instance, in the case of Spain, we have been able to grow this debate because we have talked so much about productivity statistics, and this is a discourse that the media amplifies. It can reach certain audiences, also some companies. So we have, I think, to be conscious that the productivity argument is useful in a strategic manner. We can discuss more in depth if there are risks or not tied to this strategy, but for me, it's a kind of argument, a political argument that we can use. And tied to that, on talking about the trials, I think we have to be also aware of what we are doing as a civil society, as unions, etc. So what has been happening in recent years, for me at least, is a process of what sometimes academics call policy learning. So we have been given some evidence that work time reduction works. Many firms have trialed it. We have been evaluating it. We have a lot of data in many dimensions, etc. So when you ask people, the new common sense is that work time reduction is good. It works. So we have created this. It has not become from the void. I mean, it's a thing that we have done sometimes unconsciously, I think, but it's a strategy that has been developing in recent years. So policy learning and the productivity argument, I think, are two elements to consider when we design our strategies and reflect about what we should do. And regarding the role of the European policies, I think it's a space yet to explore. I think. I have not heard much about it, but I think it's a good point because, for instance, I was talking about these policy learning processes, and in many countries it has been important to be able to refer to what other countries were doing. For instance, talking about Iceland or talking about the UK trials. This has helped a lot gain ground to the debate in many countries. So it will be important to have like something at European level that we can refer to. So I don't know how it has to be structured or what it has to do. I'm not an expert on European policy, but yeah, I think it's an area that we have to explore. And even this network, it's a good sign that we have to work together in this sphere in the European policy.
Thank you very much to all my panelists. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for this session. I believe there is a short break and the panelists will still be around. So I'm going to offer them up. If you want to come and ask them a question, they're here. But thank you very much.